All right, recording is officially started. Welcome to another Gateway community meeting. We have a bunch of things on the agenda, so if you can type in your name, that would be great. Let's go ahead and start the first topic. Jenny, did we already resolve that? Okay, cool. That was fast. So we'll go to your next topic then. Requirements to approve the addition of a new maintainer.
Yeah, so this is kind of related to the previous one about adding new people as maintainers. Oh, let's move down here. Okay. Yeah, so currently our contributor guide says that you need 2 approvals from current maintainers of the repo and no one to object. So this is the first time we've tried. I have a PR open to add right now someone, Tim, as a maintainer, and we need, I guess, in practice, how do we enforce like 2 approvals and no rejections? Do we leave it open for some time and make sure no one objects, or is it good enough to just have like 2 approvals and we don't have to wait?
Maybe across the span of one community meeting where we call it out.
Yeah, I like that because I'm thinking about even in Istio, we don't set an arbitrary 1 week. I mean, 1 week is nice when there is not a meeting, but if there's a meeting and there's no objection, I think that's relatively significant to call it out. Because I don't want to block people either. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So should we just in this meeting, like, see if anyone has objections?
Yeah. So let's call it, if people are good with Tim, let's give a thumbs up. If people are not good at promoting Tim as a maintainer, now it's your chance to say it. All right, I'm seeing the thumbs up, so I think we're good. So Jenny, if you want to maybe just clarify in the template, either when there's no meeting, wait for a period of time, which is a week, or present at the meeting and check out if there's any objections. All right, thank you so much for taking notes. I don't hear any objections on this topic. With that, we're going to move to the next topic since last time we ran out of time. So, Art, I think you are here. Can you take us through on this topic?
Hey, yeah, thanks, Lynn. I just had a couple of doc-related issues that I was chatting about with a few people like Lawrence, and he suggested just kind of getting either the community's opinion or just kind of sharing updates about that. So one of them is, as we are redoing the kgateway docs, obviously there's, like the new API style. And one of the outstanding questions was also whether there would be a CLI. And I'm thinking that there is not a CLI that we will be using for the release. And so I will also, we can also remove all of these CLI related docs as we revise the kgateway. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up, see if that aligns with what everyone else was expecting or not. So for example, if you go to the get started page where you are right there,
yep,
you have tabs for, CLI. So those would go away basically.
It might be worth it to at least call out gateway CTL. Right, so you can get a lot of nice sort of insights there for a lot of the starting things, and then maybe at some point we can also, I think one of the things that'd be great, is if someone wants to contribute some extra extensions so that we can validate anything that's an extension on gateway params that kgateway has, right? That'd be super cool.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a good idea to use gateway CTL whenever it makes sense. Awesome.
Yeah. By the way, Art, have you seen this? So if you go to kgateway.dev and if you go to, sorry, I went to the agent tab. Sorry about that. So if you go to kgateway.dev and if you go to kgateway and then if you go to the tags, so this is out just so everybody knows. And I actually really enjoy the quick start guide to Nathan's point, right? I think Nathan, you were talking about using some of the kubectl commands instead. So I was following this. It actually was pretty easy to use. So maybe, yeah, I don't quite like this because right now I'm actually having trouble to get this working last time on my machine with OSCLI. So yeah.
This is quite a bit outdated. I know Damien had opened an issue to revise the getting started, and I think Craig had mentioned working on that, but I'll reach out to him and see if he wants me to just kind of like quickly update this in the meantime for the new release.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. If you can follow up with him. Yeah, because I've actually been trying this today and I noticed like a lot of this can be changed now that like, oh, what class name is different and yeah, the namespace is different. Yeah. So thank you. You also have a question about the contributor guide, right? I think it's good to have it here listed somewhere on our doc. It's pretty common to have a simple page, and maybe it can just be a simple page and link back to the other contributor guide in our GitHub.
Okay. Yeah, this came up actually today because Tim was also, as he was cleaning up the repo, we currently had it in the kgateway dev repo, not the website one, but like the regular development one. And so if we want it in the docs, we can just delete it, like remove it entirely from that repo and add it as a doc page here. Yeah, so if that sounds good with everyone and that's what we want to do, we can go ahead and just get that done too.
Okay, but so just make sure we're on the same page. We will still have this on the community repo, right? The contributing portion. Like this stays in the community repo as well, is that right?
Well, I'm not sure. We could move all of this to the docs. I feel like the ways to contribute section would be very similar to what would be in the docs. I'm not sure about the requirements for, well, actually, I mean, maybe, yeah, I guess that's part of the question that I had for the community. Like, if we want this, like, do we want the same content in both places?
No, maybe just build a link. I mean, I think we only want one content somewhere, but I think it's okay to cross-link. The reason I mentioned about having this continue to be here, I mean, the content doesn't have to be there. It could just be linked to the doc if we want.
Okay.
It's a common practice when people land in a repo, they look at the community repo for contributing. And it's also a common practice for people looking at our documentation, figure out how to contribute. So I think it's good to have it as a landing page on both.
Yeah. My personal, I guess, preference would be to move this contribution guide to the docs, cross-link it here, but then leave the other, you know, like contributor ladder, governance, maintainers. Like that seems a little bit more in the weeds and more of like a community repo thing to me. But if anyone, I don't know, has other thoughts on that.
I guess I'm fine either way. I just don't want to have it in two places, so I have to submit two PRs. And I do want to have it here, or if you do decide to move, so whichever is easier for you.
I mean, we can also link out to this from the doc site. I guess it just depends where we expect people to read the content. Either place is fine with me.
Yeah, I think both of the places are very popular. I know a lot of the community have a contributing.md, so it's critical to have one here, that I do feel. Yeah, it might be easy for you to just link it from doc to this page.
Yeah.
I think it's less work for everybody.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, I think we are good on that. I see some new topic popping up. Let me accept them. So Nathan, I think you're up next. Should we cancel this meeting if there's no topic before the meeting? That's
The last meeting, which we ended up canceling, since no one, yeah. Basically the February 4th meeting, right?
Yeah, we did cancel on the calendar. We also put a note here, right?
Yeah. So that, I don't know why this sort of came to the next section. So we're good.
Oh, okay. So I guess it's okay to remove this then.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. All right, so the next one is glue proxy renaming. And the reason I have it here, just give you all some context, is I actually just deploy the glue proxy myself. Actually, let me see if I can put a screenshot in the agenda so people have the context. But basically, is there is a naming of glue proxy right now that we need to think about how do we resolve this. So I think Yuval, Stephen might reach out to you for some of the discussion in the past. So basically, we have to think through, right? There is kgateway serving as ingress and kgateway serving as a waypoint as well. And so we have to think through, do we just replace glue with kgateway, or do we get rid of glue proxy entirely so that when I deploy kgateway as a waypoint in my gateway resource, instead of right now I'm saying my gateway resource is HTTP, I could say it's kgateway waypoint, and then this whole name would be represented as kgateway waypoint, which I think I like that. So I'm going to pause here to see if other people have any opinions on this.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to users. If it's not confusing to basically, if I understand it correctly, you think the name of the deployment should equal the name of the gateway. Is that accurate to say?
Yes. So basically in this one, right, I basically deploy this particular gateway, which I can post it here just so everybody have it. So I basically deploy this gateway, right? So the way I'm asking is I want to create a name of HTTP as my kgateway, and we have this glue proxy as the prefix, so it automatically, yes. So this is cool, but the challenging is it's not very consistent with how Istio deploys waypoint. Ian, correct me if I'm wrong. I think in Istio, if I specify Istio waypoint or whatever name, that is the deployment. We don't prefix anything.
Yeah, yeah, you're saying not because I see Denian writing we should change the prefix. You're saying not change the prefix, remove the prefix.
Yeah, I'm thinking, do we even need to keep the prefix? That is the discussion, right? I think everybody understand we need to remove glue because of the naming changing. But now the question is, do we even have the prefix? What does the prefix serving us? And if there's any backwards compatibility concern too.
Yeah, I think that's fine because basically the gateway would protect us from duplicate names. So I think it was mainly probably done for just UX, so the user know what this is. But I think it's fine to remove. And worst case, we can later add a parameter to add a prefix if the user wants it. That's my personal opinion.
Proxy is such a common like name that if you ever want to install like kgateway alongside another, deploy and wanted to test it out, having some way to at least not consume that name seems like a good idea.
Sorry, I think, was there some hands too?
Yeah, it's just me. I just threw my hand up. I really think we should keep a prefix with it. And I think this is to Nathan's point is we just use proxy, although it's unlikely. There's a higher probability, in my opinion, that there would be some kind of name collision. And so, if we were being overly verbose, where it's, this ridiculously long name, it would be a different story. But, kgateway to me, kgateway to prefix a proxy, I think avoids the potential for collisions and just really stands out as it being associated to the kgateway controller.
Also, I'm not sure proxy is a great name either, just in terms of component. Ideally, I would call this data plane, but that's also pretty long. I'm just trying to think of a user with all the terminology we use, and all of a sudden there's a pod called proxy. It's like, what are we proxying? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also, don't forget, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this deployment is also tied to a service account. So, for instance, right now it's Glue, Proxy, HTTP. I probably have a service account called that, right? So,
Yeah.
in terms of service account, it's getting a little bit more complex in the case of Istio. Well, I would have to figure out the service account for my waypoint because that's going to change my authorization policy. So that needs to be taken into some consideration too.
So what's the objections to not having any prefix, Daniel or Nathan?
A higher probability for name collisions.
By the way, is okay, let me ask you this, Daniel. So let's say if I'm deploy a gateway called my waypoint instead of HTTP in this example here. And if I'm deploy using two gateway class name, right? So I deploy once the first time, I'm deploy with Istio waypoint. And the second time, I'm calling it also my waypoint. I'm deploy it with kgateway waypoint or kgateway as my gateway class name. Would that cause any issue for the user? Because I'm thinking about the migration scenario. Ideally, when I switch the gateway provider, all I need to do is change my class name, right? So I can continue and reuse my identity. I can continue to use my service account. I think that really simplifies the transition, so I don't have to change my authorization policy, for instance, or network policy.
I mean, that requires a lot more testing because we need to make sure we smoothly transition between the deployment that ECL owns to the deployment that we own. So yeah, I think the answer is not clear if that's going to work.
So
Yeah, if we don't have testing for that, then yeah, to Yuval's point, it's hard to comment on it.
So in Istio, we won't send traffic to that waypoint until it gets an address written into the gateway status.
And the address will still be, at no point will the address not be written.
No, that's what I'm saying. And we ask that should never be removed. So you probably don't want to do that. Like just change the gateway class. It's probably better to create a second one, and then once it's ready, you can send traffic to it.
So you probably want to change to a different name and the gateway class.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, if you're really worried about like traffic never goes to the wrong place. I mean, we could try testing some other stuff, but
okay, let's say even if I change to, let's say if I have this deploy as Istio waypoint as my name and gateway class as Istio waypoint, right? Now I'm rolling out to Glue, so I'm calling it Glue waypoint, right? And I'm changing to Glue waypoint as my gateway class. And the fact that we added this prefix is going to cause user additional work because I have to go back to change to my authorization policy, not only change the name, but also remember the prefix. So that's the additional caveat user have to go through, not just simply on the name.
And does it seem reasonable to, by default, not have a prefix, and then if someone wants it, we can do it in the gateway path?
I don't think we have prefix defaulting Istio.
no, you just get a deployment that matches whatever your gateway was called.
Yeah.
Because the name collision, it's not going to be with other gateways because those will be caught by the gateway name. It might be with other user deployments, which I personally think is not high likelihood. And if it is, we can provide them an option, to override it. And maybe we can add like safety mechanisms to make sure that we're not overriding a user resource, like we're not overriding a resource that we don't own.
Yeah, we definitely should have that safety mechanism, I think.
We definitely don't have that, I know, because I wrote the code.
Okay, so because if we have that safety mechanism, I think you would feel comfortable without the prefix.
I guess Kamik, yeah, but probably Danny and Nathan should answer that. They had the original reservation.
Yeah, I just think it's a different use case. Like in my opinion, when we're talking Istio and a service mesh, to me it's like expected that for the namespace is part of the mesh and managed by the mesh, and that the likelihood of proxies being deployed is highly unlikely. Whereas like in a standard cluster where you can use a gateway implementation such as kgateway or anything else out there that supports gateway API, there's I think a higher probability of name collisions.
But name collision with what?
With some other deployment out there, like a user on a particular namespace says, I'm gonna, run an Nginx deployment and call it proxy.
But why is that? I'm not sure why is that not a problem in a mesh.
I mean, that's why I said it's not completely off the table as a problem. I just, at a high level, thinking about this, off the top of my head during this discussion, it's like, okay, well, how often do people like deploy kind of their own proxies in a mesh? It's like typically it's like if you're running workloads in the mesh, it's you're going to use the Istio APIs to get proxying features.
I think I see what you're saying. You're saying there's less likelihood that someone will deploy something with a similar name because they're probably doing it through the mesh anyway.
Right. And I mean, and outside of Istio in a standard cluster like what we're talking about here is a user could just have their own Nginx deployment, call it proxy, or I mean, have we audited the other gateway implementations? And maybe there's some other gateway implementations that do the same thing, and it's a much higher probability.
The one thing that doesn't matter is other gateway implementations, because they will also use the gateway name. So that means there's never a collision.
But they could potentially create, like if we're saying, create these proxy deployments, let's just call them the deployment proxy. I mean, if another gateway.
You were calling them the gateway name.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the gateway name. So basically, if you look at here, Daniel, so I'm creating a gateway as a user, and I specify my gateway class. And right now I'm doing a get pod, but if we do a kubectl get deployment, it would create glue-proxy-http as my deployment. But if we get rid of the prefix, it would just call http as my deployment.
Yeah, okay, so less likely, but still possible. So what I'm getting at is here we say, okay, let's just call the deployments proxy and then the gateway name. And again, could be other gateway implementations in the cluster that they say, hey, let's just use the name proxy for the deployment, and then we have collisions.
I think we're proposing to call whatever username user wants to define their gateway with.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the best way to do it. Lynn.
So yeah,
and also I'll say for Istio, if there's like a deployment and a service and stuff that exists, we'll check to see if it could possibly be valid, but we won't overwrite it. And it's probably never going to be valid. But... So you get some condition that's like, the listeners. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, you just get a condition that's like, oh, by the way, the HBone listener is not exposed on this thing, so it's not a valid gateway or a valid waypoint.
Yeah, and I guess just generally, like weighing the pros and the cons, for the small prefix to help avoid name collisions, along with just it standing out even a little bit more as you're, a kgateway administrator and looking at resources. A kgateway will stand out a little bit more, and so I just, weighing the pros and the cons. I just think the pros can outweigh the cons, and I guess I'm not necessarily following how using the kgateway prefix would potentially cause issues with transition.
The problem is that when you create policies in ambient, you use the service account name. And currently our service account name is also prefixed, which means that if a user in Istio migrates from Istio waypoint to kgateway waypoint, they will have to change all their auth policies accordingly.
Yeah. And I made that mistake myself because the first time I moved to glue as waypoint, I only replaced Istio waypoint with glue waypoint because I thought that's the only thing I need to do. And of course, it didn't work. I had to go back to figure out what exactly is the service account and, think out, we have this prefix thing. So it's like an actual 20 minutes debugging for everybody move from Istio to glue to kgateway.
Well,
So-
and also to be fair, if you care about this, like if you want kgateway on the name of your gateway, you could put kgateway minus ingress or whatever, right?
Yeah, you can
And then
put
you'll
it
get
right
it. You'll
here.
get it if you want it because it's
exactly.
mechanical. You won't get kgateway minus kgateway ingress, which would be annoying.
Right.
So
That's the other reason why prefix could be very confusing. Yeah.
So I'm personally, the main thing with the prefix is kind of like ownership. I think if we remove it and verify that we're not overriding user existing objects, that would alleviate the concern of collisions. And then we pop an error to the user, tell them, look, you have a collision, add this prefix parameter in your gateway parameters. To me, that sounds reasonable.
or just rename it, right? Prefix
yeah,
parameter,
yeah,
just
user.
rename it.
I don't care what. Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
guess
whatever we tell them to do. Though, I guess.
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess we can surface that in the status of the gateway, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we tell
exactly.
people, you have a collision on your existing deployment. Can you please? Okay.
And I think it's a good balance of UX and because I think like 99% of the time there wouldn't be a problem. In fact, with our current prefix approach, there is an edge case that's problematic. If you have a really long name, we'll reach over the 64 character limit or whatever it is. And by doing the name exactly the same, we kind of guarantee that we're not going to go over.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'm good with that. If others are good, I will actually, I think Lawrence sent me a GitHub issue. I will summarize the discussion here. So we have it in GitHub as well, because there's already an issue for this.
Do we want to have any option for the user to deploy a gateway implementation with Helm?
Yes, we do.
If so, then we need to have this logic anyway, so that when you create the gateway resource, we don't overwrite with a default implementation. You get all of the stuff that was normally in there.
Yeah, we definitely do. But that's a broader thing because we also need to signal. I mean, unrelated to the overwrite, my point is that the control plane should not even try to overwrite because it should know that this gateway was manually deployed.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
We definitely failed even to reuse our existing Helm chart and just expose it publicly. I'm sure we'll have users that will refuse to use automatic provisioning. It's a bit annoying when you upgrade, things roll over. I don't know if it's traditional enterprises, production users would like that.
Yeah. In that, the only reason I bring it up is because we probably don't want to put the like condition, hey, you've got a name conflict in that case. So maybe that's a reason why we would never put that. We could just do what Istio does and say like, hey, listen, you have a gateway that asks us to expose 8443 on a service that doesn't have that. So it's just a mismatch and it's invalid.
So I think whether or not we should use this component that deploys, that should, be understandable from something on the gateway itself. And if we don't need to deploy, we don't deploy, we don't use that error. But if we do deploy, I think it'd be helpful to tell the user explicitly we tried to deploy and failed, versus this port, the HBone is not exposed. You know what I mean? It's not actionable.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, I mean, the issue or the condition that we get in Istio, you would have to sort of know what's going on. It's not as helpful as something that more meaningful.
Okay, can we wrap this up and move to Daniel? We are 4 minutes over time, so I do want to get to Daniel's topic so he doesn't have to wait for another week. Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, so just calling out the inference extension API PR. Thanks to those of you that have done an initial review on it. So I appreciate that. I have updated the PR just to resolve a merge conflicts and answered everyone's questions. So please just take a look at this. I call it out just because I am starting the implementation of the API. So just want to make sure that I don't go too far down the implementation and have to do some major changes to the API. But if I have to, so be it. Yeah, I just want to call that out. And then I opened up, associated to this PR, I opened up an issue, which is my next item here. And there has been some discussion around it. And so I just want to call that out if folks haven't seen this issue, if you could take a look at it. And I'm just finding that using gateway class parameters as a reference for both a gateway class and a gateway is just not optimal. And so I just call it out because I think it's something that, especially now as we're making a lot of these changes to APIs and so forth, that it's something that we should really consider. Last but not least, I actually just threw this point up here as Lynn, you were kind of sharing your desktop a minute ago, and just taking a quick look. The first thing is there's tons of different branches that we should really clean up, and really the only branches that should exist in the repo are release branches. So that means we're all following the guidelines as committer or as contributors of forking, pushing to our fork, and then submitting PRs. And then I also see that we've got this schema for release candidates. For example, here I show v1.18.0 -beta 24. This does differ than Semver, where if you take a look at Semver, that is different. So maybe I'll open up an issue on this, but I just wanted to add it here since I saw that these differ from than what we should be using for Semver.
Okay, so the version, I think we decided on 2.0. Daniel, are you in the meeting? We decided to use 2.0, right? For the KP version.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably good to feed the feedback to Tim. I feel like Tim has been doing a lot of work around branch. I'm not sure if Tim is here. So I will tag him. Maybe him.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and Lynn, I'll open up an issue on this.
Yeah.
Probably actually separate issues since they're related, but there are two different issues that can be resolved. So, first issue is cleaning up all the branches and just having release branches. And the second issue is that for release candidates, we should, because SEMVer provides guidance for naming of release candidates, and the schema that we're using is different than what SEMVer provides. So I'll open up both those issues, tag you and Tim on them.
All right, that sounds great. Yeah, thank you so much for bringing this up. Any other topics, or should we wrap it up? Sorry, it runs a few minutes over. All right, thanks everybody for joining. See you next week. Bye.
All right, thanks, Lynn. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.